Howdy folks, nice hot day out here in Virginia. Been a while since I did a video. It's one of those days where you kind of want to just clean guns and have a nice cold frosted beverage. This one happens to have lost its head though, and I got this little device here. Let's see if we can get it to work. It's called the Sonic Foamer. One of those things that came out of Japan again. They sure do like their beer out there. If you can see it, it's kind of got mood lighting. It's really annoying actually. Might have to rip out that LED, but you can actually hit this button and change the color of the mood lighting. I don't know what the purpose of all that is. Anyway, the main purpose of this thing, though, is for this other button. Let's see if we can try that out. Look at that. Sonic induction of a new foam on that, new head of foam on that beer. They say it releases the aroma, makes it twice as delicious, and more enjoyable. Well, that is nice. Anyway, that lighting gizmo on this Sonic Foamer is starting to bug me, so I'm going to switch her off. There's this slider on the bottom. Here we go. Set that aside. We'll get down to business. Show you one of my guns in my collection. It's kind of unique, kind of different. I do like Smith and Wessons, as you know. Everybody see my carry? I love carrying this thing. If I'm not carrying a 1911, then I'm carrying this guy, Smith and Wesson Performance Center. Great gun. And every single Smith and Wesson I own is a revolver up until this gun. Here it is. Now this is kind of old production. This is old school. If you've all only seen those Smith and Wesson in plastic boxes, I guess this is the precursor. This is some sort of cardboard box, but they've got the edges reinforced here with metal buckles. Kind of neat. You know, even back in the day, lots of quality. All the documentation here on the side, and as you can see here, let's adjust the view here. It's a Smith and Wesson Escort 22 long rifle automatic. The model 61. This happens to be the second iteration, the 61-2, and it is nickel plated. Kind of thing maybe you might see in a gambling casino, or I hate to say it, maybe a lady's purse. And here we go. It actually comes with its own little carrying case. So let's take a look at that. I haven't even opened this thing up. Big old buckle zipper here. And, ooh, really soft, smooth inside. Very felt. Very felt. This is the old stuff. We got a cleaning kit here. Unopened. And this gun, I believe, was made in the early 70s. I think that the Smith & Wesson 61 was the first pocket pistol, semi-automatic pistol, non-revolver, that Smith & Wesson started producing. Still got the old wax paper from Smith & Wesson. And there she is. Actually, underneath all this, it's kind of neat just to take a walk down memory lane, I guess. We have the manual with a picture of the more common version of this, which is the blued version with the brown or tortoise shell grips. We have all the information about this particular gun. 22 long rifle, 5 rounds plus 1 in the barrel. They don't mention, I guess, so technically 6 rounds. 2 1/8 inches, 4 13/16 inches, which is pretty much the same length as a NAA, North American Arms Derringer. Height's a little bit more. Only 14 ounces, so yeah, as it says, it's an air weight. It's less than a pound. This does say the finish is blue, but I think this is just a standard manual. Let's take a look at this thing. Well, it's nice that it has all the instructions here, because I did spend the better part of this morning taking this thing apart. And, well, not instructions, but part identifiers. What they don't have here is the price list. I've seen some of these online where there's a price list, and we're talking about pennies. If you were probably to go to Numrich Arms, For replacement parts, I'm sure that you'd be probably paying at least 10 times what the original listing was. And there's instructions here on the back on how to field strip. So let's take a look at that thing. Oh, here, this is kind of neat. Here you go, Smith and Wesson's warranty registration card. And what's kind of neat about it are some of the questions that they ask. Let's see, here we go. So first of all, they want you to list the model number, serial number, all that are good stuff. And then it asks here for professional use, municipal police, state police, sheriff, plant guard. That's interesting, plant guard, huh? Private detective, kind of interesting there too. Because this almost looks like something you might see in a Philip Marlowe kind of movie. Federal police. I like that they separate the different kinds of police here. State police, municipal police, federal police. And then for personal use, we have hunting, plinking, self-protection, target shooting, and collector. I think I can probably check off collector on this one. Maybe plinking. Not sure how plinking and target shooting really differ. And that asks also like your age bracket. And they only have 3 brackets, you know. Under 25, between 25 and 45, and over 45. Nowadays, you know, that is essentially done away with, and we have brackets for almost each individual age group. And how dare they ask this next question? Let's see, can you see that? How many pistols and revolvers do you own, including this one? How dare you, Smith and Wesson? That is my information. And what outdoor or gun magazines do you read? Well, Rifleman, obviously. NRA's Rifleman. Anyway, neat looking gun. Let's take a look at this thing. Yeah, nickel plated, right? Look, shiny, shiny. Isn't that pretty? Alright. It's obviously shiny on the sides, and we got a beaded pattern here on the top. So let's get that a little closer in. Good looking gun. I guess Bakelite was a thing back in the 70s. So you got these grips, which I would just call plastic grips nowadays. Great condition. I suppose they're simulating mother of pearl. Couldn't tell you. I thought I would probably hate how that looked, but it's growing on me. Kind of got this gun because I started watching that PBS series, Mrs. Fisher's Murder Mysteries, and it's kind of odd to see a PBS special where someone's using a gun, and she uses a shiny little gun. I think hers is actually gold, not like this one, but this is exactly what I thought she would probably carry. Nice and light, good heft to it. Grip, it's going to be a problem. Let's see, kind of like when I had a Glock 26. Pinky has nowhere to go. I guess you're going to have to like cup and ball this thing at the range, or just practice single-handedly, or bracing your arm. Alright, let's be safe first before we even get our fingers near that trigger. This has European-style magazine release. So you can slide back this catch, pull out the magazine. Here's the gun. And there is no actual slide lock, so we're just going to pull this back. Take a look down. Alright, I don't know if you caught that. Barrel's on the bottom, guide rod, recoil spring on the top. Interesting. And what you'll actually figure out after thinking about that for a second is the barrel is integral to the frame of the gun. Now, supposedly that's going to make this a little bit more accurate. Who knows? I've shot at the range with something this small, this hard to manage. If I'm shooting at 20 feet and hitting the center mass, I'm pretty happy. All right. Well, the takedown's kind of interesting, but first let's go over some of the features. This is the second iteration, as I said, and what that means is it's got, if I remember correctly, first of all we got a barrel lug here. So that means that the barrel could be replaced if necessary at some point. You can see the screw pattern there. And I think also this means that there's a magazine disconnect. So even though we've already charged the cylinder, we have safe and we have fire here. So if I slip it there, that's safe, there that's fire. But without the magazine in here, I got a magazine disconnect. If I pull the trigger, nothing happens. Now, since this is a rimfire, I want something to sacrifice and take the hit of that pin. I'm going to use some of these snap caps, even though their purpose is just for function check in terms of loading and unloading. I'm going to sacrifice some of this aluminum to take the strike. So here, let's take a look at this thing. Slip the mag in. Alright, let's try to focus in a little better. Now if I go ahead and pull back, it's kind of neat to watch slowly. It's going to lift that bullet, snap it straight up when it comes out of the magazine. There it goes. Now before I fire, I thought this was just a retaining pin. Not at all. This is a primed firing pin indicator right here. So if you brushed up against that, you'd know that the firing pin is ready to go. This gun is ready to fire. Anyway, we have safe, so let's move that to the safe. Nothing, nothing, nothing. I don't hear any click, click, click. Let's move that to fire. It's good I'm left-handed, so this is going to be a little awkward. And here, let's listen for that. Boom! There we go. And now this pin on the back has gone flush. So let's try ejecting this thing. Not a good sign. Pin is now sticking out a tiny bit again. Just a nub. Alright. And that ejection problem there was just probably these things are getting so chewed up right now that, I mean, I've been feeding them through all the different 22s that I have, that maybe there wasn't a good purchase for the extractor to yank on. So there we go. Fire. Fire. There we go. Alright. So there we go. Now, basic field stripping, piece of cake. You're going to have to pardon me while I try to get used to this flash and glare off of this thing. Basic field stripping is you push in the guide rod here at the front. Obviously making sure this thing is unloaded as we just did earlier. Alright, so if I'm pushing that in, bear if I get my fingernail on it, now I can lift out the front sight. Now I can release the tension, the guide rod, and the recoil spring. Move the slide back, pop it straight off. This is basic field strip right here. Now this being a 22, it tends to get pretty dirty. So I'm going to make sure I have like a thing for parts over here. Alright, now we're going to get down to the brass tacks of this gun. Alright, I'm not going to do anything really with the slide. Not too much in here I want to mess around with. There is the extractor here, which can be replaced if you go into Numrich. I'm sure they have the parts. But I haven't ordered one yet, and I don't feel the need to do so just yet. Alright, let's see if we can adjust lighting as we do this. Give me a second. I keep forgetting which one are we dealing with here. White balance, there we are, that's what I'm looking for. White balance. Alright. We're going to take this gun apart. I need some screwdrivers, varying sizes. You could use a punch for a little bit of it. Once again, this is all just figure DD. Just messing around with this gun earlier. Let's get rid of the magazine. We don't need that in there, especially since we have a magazine disconnect in there. That can make things a little tricky. Alright, first off, we're going to take off these Bakelite grips. And remember, this is, essentially just plastic. So when you do put the Bakelites back on, just slightly finger tight. You don't want to crack these things at all. Alright. Now, if you haven't done it in a while, these could get a little sticky on here. You can see that I've actually cleaned this thing. It's nice and shiny. But you can always, there's like room here where you can stick an Allen wrench in and pop them out a tiny bit if you had to. We're going to do the same on the reverse. And I did this side first because there's parts that can fall out over on this side. I'll be careful about that. Everything happens on the left side of the gun, pretty much. Okay. Get yourself a nice pair of screwdrivers so that you don't mar the screws. Obviously, the previous owner, I did buy this used, or the previous owner before that, that is an old gun, had been into this thing before. Alright, they're at the beginning of the guts of this thing. Alright, the first thing to be really careful of, that little tiny pin that pops out, the loaded indicator here, it's got a little spring around it. Well, you can lift the whole pin. Actually, let's see, can we zoom in on all this? Alright, here we go. Alright. Okay. Just lift this straight out. Straight out, like that. And once again, there's a spring on here. You lose that, you're in big trouble. You'll be searching all over the floor for that thing. You could separate the two. Here's the spring. Here's the pin. You have to take them apart. Fine, there they go. Alright, now I got all kinds of things here. I mean, what are all these parts and pieces? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of some of this internal guts. This bar here with the screw is part of your extractor, but the rest of it helps retain everything else. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to undo, let's get a better screwdriver. Alright, put him here so you can just see what that screw looks like. Small screw, and if I angle this out, you can see this is the extractor. And also, it helps the barrel rides along in the side of this, the slide. And so when it pops out and the extractor, here's the extractor here, right? When it backs up with the bullet, this ledge here knocks out the bullet so it flies out the opening. So we got that part. The extractor. This is the disconnect, and you can kind of see, actually this lifts out too also, and there's a pin involved right here, so you can actually turn it over to get rid of that pin to come out, which you might end up doing. Nope, I got it. So here's the disconnect, little pin. The disconnect actually fits into this little groove here on the slide, which allows the trigger to be pulled again once it flips up into that groove. And here's the safety. And that you kind of just angle out. It's kind of a hook on the bottom of it. There it is. Piece of cake. So we got all that stuff in there. Now there are 3 screws holding this side plate in. Okay? I'm going to pop those all out. In case everybody's wondering, this is not the barrel. This is part of the recoil slide. The recoil spring fits in there and all that good stuff. The barrel is integral to the frame. Anyway, screw 1, and I just left out this screw here just so you can see these screws are considerably different. Okay, give her that tiny one again. Oops, I guess we might want to see that these are all the same. I mean, even without the grips on, doesn't this thing look nice? Sometimes when I function check it with without the Bakelite on, I have all the parts held together because this extractor sits in here, but this screw hole that holds the extractor is also the one that holds the grips in place, so you kind of have to drop one of the grip screws into place to get everything to work right. But I just like that all metal look. What a neat looking gun that way, huh? Problem is that we have other pins that can start falling out then. Alright, so all three of these plate screws, same size, same look. And when I talk about previous owner opening them up, I can see little tiny notches or twists from a ill-fitting screwdriver on these things, so they're not perfect. I might get some of these off of Numrich, who knows. Alright, this is kind of an optional way of doing it now. This pin here can slide through to the back, and this pin is holding your magazine catch. And I slide it back because I don't want to take it all the way out, so I'm pushing it down and it's flush. I'm going to use this pin punch and move it down a tiny bit. It's sticking out the back here. It's not all the way out. I don't want to drop it all the way out because there's a spring on the magazine catch or things that I don't really mind them popping off. It's just a little bit of hassle. Now when I take this side plate off, I got to be careful about a couple things. I got a big pin here, a moderate sized pin here, and I got a small one I got to be careful here. This holds the trigger in place. I believe this has the mainspring holder on the end. Or wait, we can look at the parts here. Let me look at this part list here. We got part 6726. The mainspring retainer. There we go. I knew that list would come in handy. And over here we have the hammer pin. So I'm just going to ease everything real slowly. Just walk everything up a tiny bit. Walk, walk, walk. So let me get back on the screen here. And nothing really goes flying out like crazy, but if you're unsure of yourself, make sure to have a nice cardboard box to do all this inside of. There we are. One of the other differences between a 61-2 and the 61-3 is that I believe these were forged, the 61-2s, and the 61-3 is die cast. Anyway, this is, I believe, the magazine safety. When the magazine slides in, we can actually approximate that now. It lifts it out of position. Anyway, there's still more parts we can take out of this thing. This is the pin holding in the trigger. I can lift that straight out. Now the trigger does have a spring back here, and if I wiggle this out a tiny bit first, that spring is pushing against this bar, so now the spring won't go flying if I have this bar up. I can actually pull out the spring now, and if I wanted to, I could disassemble this part too for cleaning in all the grooves and everything else. And then here's the magazine release. There's a leaf spring of sorts that's pushing against the sear. You can kind of wiggle that out. It's going to be hard to see, but let's see if we can zoom in. That leaf spring actually rests on this groove in the mainspring retainer here. So when we're putting it back together again, we're going to try to fit it into that groove. That's going to hold it in its position, proper position. Alright, back in focus please. Have a little bit more beer. Alright, now we can pull out the pin holding the magazine catch. And once again with this thing, if you had pulled the pin all the way out, well, I guess we can do that now, that spring can be released. But this gun has been cleaned earlier this morning, so I'm going to leave it all in this assembly like this. Alright. And now we have the guts of the gun pretty much that we can take apart if we want to. I can release tension off of the hammer, and I can pull out this pin here holding the sear in place. And there's the hammer. And I can pull out this pin and work out the hammer too. But for me it's easy enough to clean around all these areas and get all that 22 soot out of the way. That's pretty much the whole thing taken apart. Well, let's put her back together again. So I'm going to do everything pretty much in the reverse. A couple tricks to take into account, but it should be easy enough. We pop in the sear pin. Now the sear has one tab on it. You see that? Part of it sticks up. Well, that's going to be facing down. It's going to be facing back towards the back of the gun. I'm going to move the hammer back into the down position and lock the sear in place. Okay. Alright, this always gets me. I can't remember which way this goes. Oops. So, oh, actually, yeah, of course I remember. The bigger part of the foot can rest in here, I believe. So the bigger part of the foot facing to the back, and allowing the leaf spring now to be bent, slipped into that groove, and pushed down around against the sear. Let's see if we can see that a little better. First of all, let me try to move this pin in a little bit more. There we go. Okay. So we're going to zoom in on this. Here's that like little thin leaf spring here, resting in the groove. There we go. Resting in this groove, and just resting against that sear. Alright, you can kind of, oops, let's go back and focus. Kind of see the whole action of that spring like this. Okay. Now we got our trigger. We're going to get back in. Here's the trigger pin. Put the trigger pin in place. Right there. And you'll notice that it's like a rolling pin. The fat is the fat middle and the skinny ends. Alright. So we're going to drop that in here. And then on the trigger, I got to remember to pop in this spring. Okay. And once again, you can, oops, you can see that that spring has got to end up pushing against this disconnect here. So I'm going to have that disconnect up. I'm going to move the trigger into place, start to drop it down like that. I've got to wiggle the spring into position, and as it starts to fit in the proper place, go ahead and move the magazine safety down. So now that the spring is fully captured in that groove here, it's not twisted or bent or anything. Alright. Okay. And you push the trigger all the way down, and then this magazine safety move down. And I like to catch it over here on the bottom of that sear, that little tiny lip that sticks up, right? That we're talking about. I'm gonna have to learn how to use autofocus on this thing. There you go. Caught on that lip. Alright. The insertion of the magazine is enough to just lift this out of the way. Otherwise it locks the sear in place. Once the magazine's in, comes out of the way, sear can then move and the gun can fire. Alright. Well, I think we're ready to put on the end plate. I mean the side plate. This is kind of tricky. Once again, I like to move this pin that holds the magazine catch down a bit, and then I'm going to push it back through again. So it's holding everything in place kind of down here. But at least this way I only have to overcome this pin, and this pin pretty much. Alright, in fact, the pin holding the sear will fit through here later, but I don't have to worry about that too much right now. I can let it be down a tiny bit. Alright, this is all just being careful at this point. Shiny, shiny. I try to go over all of them equally, but I have to definitely be most careful around that trigger pin. There we go. Easy peasy, Japanesey. Then you got a nice snap and a solid fit. What a nicely put together piece of machinery. Golly. Alright, before we push that pin back through, let's go ahead and get these screws back in. Once again, everything finger tight. Oopa! Finger tight. Where's that beer? Come here, beer. Good. I like to start with this one here near the trigger guard. Before I move up to the one here at the back of the gun. And finally the one near the magazine release, the very base of the gun. Kudos to anyone who's still with me. Looks like we've actually hit the 30-minute mark. Good gravy. I should learn to be a little faster with all this. But it's an old gun. I'm going to give it its time. A little bit of a polish here. Alright. We can push this pin here now back through. Until it's kind of equidistant on both sides. There you go. You kind of going to feel where it ought to be. And it's good that it's equidistant on both sides because it helps these Bakelite grips sit in the proper position. See that little indentation? That's going to fit on each one. So it's going to hold things together. Now I can start putting together some of the air guts of the gun. This is that magazine safety, part of that bar. And you can kind of see it sitting here in the middle. What's going to happen a lot the first few times you do this, if you get one of these pistols, is it's going to pop forward. And so in the middle of attaching the side plate, you can actually get in and push it back down again. So that helps to have access here in the that cavity. Alright, so we got a bunch of parts here, right? Let's see, what do we want to do? Well, we can obviously put this indicator pin in here and drop the spring over it. Let's go ahead and we're going to put the disconnect in place. So it just drops in like so, and then we have the disconnect pin. You're going to see one side of it has little notches or ridges like on a coin. Let's see if we can zoom in on that. Right? It's going to be the top of the gun. It's going to sit right there, just like that. Easy peasy Japanesey. Here's our safety. All you do is this little foot end of the safety here, you got to wiggle that into this hole here so it fits along that magazine disconnect, and it fits underneath it. We're going to actually zoom in for this one then. And we're going to focus. Alright. So it's going to fit in here like so. Sit like that. But we do have a problem. This pin here, which was on the sear, needs to be pushed out a little bit more. It's sticking out here. When we're putting on that side plate, it got pushed out. Let me take that disconnect out again. I should have done that. Forgot about it, sorry. This takes a tiny bit of effort. Let's see. Here we go. Let's use this. is one type pin. Luckily, this indicator pin didn't come out, but now I've now pushed this out enough that I can get things back in. So really quickly, pop in the disconnector pin, and now we're going to get the safety in place. So once again, we wiggle that foot in here, pop this in place, have it in the fire position. There you go, and it's going to move like that for the safe. You can kind of see it's just moving that magazine disconnect enough, so that when it's in the safe position, there's a disconnect down in the sear cannot move or engage. Alright, there we go. Once that's in place, we're going to put in the extractor, which holds, the ejector, which holds everything together. This part here. Pop it down like that. And then we have that mini screw that goes in at the top. And this I don't actually fully tighten. Oops. We do a very loose finger tight on this one. There we go. Alright, now I can start putting on the Bakelite. Okay, last picture before we put everything should look like that. Bakelite goes into position. Just finger tight. We don't want to snap that Bakelite. There we go. There's one side. And the obverse. See, if this pin hadn't been sticking out here, this is the magazine release, then this grip could essentially pretty much rotate anywhere about this axis. That pin catches that hole, and now there's only one way for it to ever be. Finger tight, finger tight. Things finger tight. Alright. Now we're going to drop this in. Now the slide does have to push against the hammer a tiny bit. Then you can slide it forward. Hold my thumb against the back here while I drop in the spring. And the guide rod. Push that in. Oops. Get my fingernail on there. Okay, push it in enough. I can drop this in place. Like so, and release. There we got our gun. Now we should function check to make sure it works. Okay. Got good action on the spring. The cocking indicator sticking out there for all the world to see. No magazine in place though. Trigger does nothing. Alright, let's get our magazine here. Pop in some of these fake aluminum rounds. Slide it in place. Alright, let's go to safe first. Click. Nothing. Let's go to fire, listen for the fire. Boom. Simulate the recoil. Book. Boom. There we go. Cool. Anyway, there's our little gun. Drop out the magazine. It's a Smith and Wesson 61-2, also called the Escort. I think because either they're marketing towards women or they're considering trying to get people to pick this up as a backup gun. A little frilly being nickel plated. I do like the look of it. I would obviously not carry this. These things have a reputation as not being that reliable. It does like high velocity rounds, I believe. So when I can find 22 long rifle, that's what I feed it. So Smith and Wesson up there. It's kind of neat to see the stylized ampersand, a little different. But a little gun, a little pocket pistol there, you know. I had to pick up poker again, so I have a reason to carry this, I guess. Anyway, take it easy, y'all. I'm gonna finish off the rest of that beer.